The rain was coming down in sheets, the kind of cold, biting rain that seemed to seep right through the cheap fabric of Mia's jacket. She held her 5-year-old son, Leo, closer, trying to shield him from the worst of it with her own body. The bus stop provided little shelter, its awning riddled with holes that let the water drip onto their heads. A sleek, black SUV with tinted windows pulled up to the curb, its engine purring softly, and a man in a dark suit stepped out, holding a black umbrella as if the rain were an insult to his day. Leo, shivering violently, saw the man and the dry, warm-looking car. In a moment of pure, childlike desperation, he pulled away from his mother and ran straight toward the man. He grabbed the polished leather of the man's pants with a tiny, wet fist. "Mister," he cried, his voice high and reedy. "My mommy is really sad, and I'm really sick. Please, just take her to her home, she's been crying a lot. I don't like when she cries." The man froze. He looked down, his initial annoyance turning into a look of pure confusion. His eyes narrowed, a cold fury flickering in them as he stared at the soaking wet child and the woman rushing toward them. "Mia," the man, whose name was Ethan Sterling, snapped, his voice a low, dangerous growl. "Get this child off of me." Mia's face went white. She hadn't recognized him at first, but the moment she heard his voice, her blood ran cold. Ethan Sterling, the CEO of Sterling Global. The man who had evicted her grandmother from her rent-controlled apartment 3 years ago. The man who had coldly looked at her grandmother, a frail woman who had lived there for 40 years, and said, "Business is business." "I'm so sorry," Mia stammered, pulling Leo back. "He's sick, he didn't mean to. Let me go," Leo cried, trying to pull away from his mother. He was looking at Ethan with pleading eyes. "Please, mister. I'll be your friend forever. My mama, she works so hard and she's so tired, and she cries every night when she thinks I'm sleeping. I don't have a daddy. Can you be my daddy?" The question hung in the air, a tiny bomb of pure, unfiltered pain. Ethan's chest tightened. The sight of this shivering, desperate little boy, offering his friendship and a place for a man in his life, was a slap in the face. It was so absurd, so raw. This wasn't a calculated move by a beggar or a con artist. This was a child that Ethan's icy exterior melted, just for a second. A crack read in the fully constructed wall he'd built around himself. He looked at the boy and saw something he hadn't seen in years. A need so pure, it was almost unbearable. He saw the deep, soulful eyes of his own son, if he'd had one. "Your mother," she cries, Ethan asked, his voice softening. He didn't know why he was asking. He should have just stepped over the child and gotten into his car. His driver was looking at him with a mixture of alarm and embarrassment. "She does," Leo said, sniffling. He wiped his nose on his sleeve. "She thinks I'm asleep, but I see her. She looks at a picture and she cries. Sometimes she doesn't have money for food, so she gives me her tea and says she ate at work." Mia felt tears welling up in her own eyes. She wanted to sink into the pavement. He'd just exposed their life to a stranger who was a billionaire with an empire that had crushed her family. "All right," Ethan said, his voice firm. He looked at his driver. "Open the back door." The driver obeyed. Ethan knelt down, getting on eye level with Leo. "Here's the thing, little man. Your mom is going to come with me for a little while. We're going to get you some dry clothes and some food." "Okay," Leo nodded, his eyes wide. Ethan stood up and looked at Mia. "Get in." "I can't," she said, her voice a whisper. "I don't know you. I don't." "This isn't. You don't have a choice," Ethan said, his tone not angry, but brooking no argument. "This child needs medical attention. I can see the fever from here. You're coming to my building. I have a doctor on call. Or you can stand here and watch him get sicker. Your choice." The threat was a lifeline, a cruel one. She was trapped. With a look of complete defeat, she got in the car, pulling a shivering Leo with her inside the car. It was warm and smelled of leather and expensive cologne. Leo, tired and red, fell asleep almost instantly against his mother. Ethan watched them, his brow furrowed. He was a man who dealt in numbers and contracts, in mergers and acquisitions. He didn't do this. He didn't do people. Yet, here he was, sitting next to a homeless-looking woman and her sick son. "Where do you live?" he asked, His voice flat. We don't have a home, Mia admitted, her voice hollow. We were staying at a shelter, but it's full for the night. I was going to try and find a laundromat to stay in, there wa-rm. Ethan sighed, pinching the bridge of his nose. He could have just had the driver take them to the NEA rest emergency room. That was the logical, clean thing to do. But the words of the boy, I don't have a daddy. Can you be my daddy? Were echoing in his head. He wasn't a father. He'd never wanted to be. His own father had been a cold, distant man who treated his family like a footnote in his business ledger. Ethan had vowed never to be that way, but in his ambition, he'd become the same man. His empire was his only child. He looked at the sleeping boy's face, peaceful for the first time since he'd seen him. At the shelter, in the chaos, he must have felt nothing but fear. But here, in the quiet warmth, he was safe. Take us to the penthouse, Ethan said to the driver. An hour later, they were in a sprawling penthouse suite overlooking the city. Mia had been given a hot shower and a set of expensive, soft pajamas. Leo had been seen by a private physician who'd given him medicine for his cold and fever. He was now asleep in a guest room, wrapped in a down comforter. Mia sat on a massive leather couch in the living room, her hands clasped in her lap. She felt like an imposter. The floor-to-ceiling windows showed a world she didn't belong to. Ethan stood near the windows, a glass of whiskey in his hand. You could have just left us, Mia said, her voice quiet. Why did you do this? Ethan didn't turn around. Because your son saw me. He saw past the suit and the car. He saw a man he wanted to call a father. He didn't see the monster your grandmother told you about. Mia flinched. You know who I am. You think I don't remember everyone I evict, Ethan said, finally turning to look at her. Your grandmother was a tough old bird. She fought it for 6 months. It was a necessary business decision. But I remembered. Necessary, Mia spat, her sorrow turning into a flash of anger. She died 3 months later, Mr. Sterling. They said it was a HRT condition, but I know it was a broken HRT. You took her home. Her home was a financial liability, Ethan said, his voice ice cold. It's that kind of thinking that made me what I am. He walked over and looked at her. He saw the defiance in her eyes, the fight she was holding on to. He saw a reflection of his own mother, who had fought for him until the day she died. Even though his father had been a tyrant, I'm going to make you an offer, Mia, Ethan said, his tone shifting. One you can't refuse. Mia looked at him. Worry. I don't need your charity. I'm not offering charity, Ethan said. I'm offering you a job. Here. In this building. You'll be my personal assistant, but I'm not paying you. I'm giving you a home, and I'll take care of your son's education and medical needs. Why, she demanded, her voice rising. To have me as a servant to rub my face in what you took from me? No. Ethan said, his voice gentle. Because that little boy in there. He made me feel something I haven't felt in 20 years. He made me feel human. Mia read at him, speechless. Was this the same man, the cold root predator who would crush anyone in his path, or was this a different side? A side he kept hidden from the world. This is a transaction. Ethan continued, his businesslike tone returning. You get shelter for you and your son. I get peace of mind. I'm not good with people, but I know business. And this deal benefits everyone. Does it? Mia asked, her voice soft. What happens when Leo gets attached to you? What happens when he starts seeing you as the father he never had? Ethan's jaw tightened. You keep him in line. This is strictly professional. But even as he said it, he knew it was a lie. He looked at the closed door of the guest room and felt a strange pull. A protectiveness he'd never felt before. Days turned into weeks. Leo, with the resilience of a child, bounced back quickly. He was curious about everything in the penthouse, especially the huge, gleaming kitchen. He'd ask Ethan, with wide eyes, can you show me how to make pancakes? Or, do you have any toys? Ethan, who had never seen a day in his life and whose idea of toys was a high-end tablet, found himself utterly baffled. But he tried. The first pancake he made was a lumpy, burnt mess. Leo laughed, a sound so pure and joyful it made Ethan's heart ache. He had never heard a child laugh like that. He hadn't heard a genuine laugh in years. That the break came one evening. Leo had come down with a slight fever again. His small hands were trembling as he tried to drink some water. He spilled it, and his face crumpled. I'm sorry, Mr. Ethan, he whispered, his eyes filling with tears. I'm such a bother. Ethan's world tilted. He looked at the child, so red of being a burden, so desperate not to be a problem. He thought of his own childhood, constantly being told he was a distraction, a nuisance. He remembered the feeling of being an inconvenienced. Ethan knelt in front of the boy and took his little hands. No, Leo, he said, his voice thick with emotion. You are not a bother. You are never a bother. He pulled the boy into his arms, holding him tight. A simple hug. But for Ethan, it was the most profound act of his life. He felt a rire inside him crumble. He had spent his whole life protecting himself from this feeling, this vulnerability. And here it was, wrapped in a 5-year-old body. Mia watched from the doorway. She saw the TRS streaming down Ethan's face. She saw the ruthless CEO, the man who had destroyed her family, cradling her son with a tenderness that took her breath away in that moment. She saw him differently. He wasn't just the villain. He was a deeply damaged man, a man who had been denied this very thing his whole life, a man who needed to be protected and nurtured, just as much as her son. Protect my young family, Ethan said, his voice a whisper into Leo's hair. I'll give up everything. It was a vow he didn't know he was making. But from that moment on, it was the only truth he knew. That the next morning, Ethan walked into his office at Sterling Global, his expression back to its usual icy mask. But his mind was elsewhere. He was thinking about the way Leo had looked at him, the way the boy had trusted him. He was thinking about the way Mia's hand had trembled when she'd taken the cup of tea he'd offered her. His phone buzzed. It was his CFO, a man named H.A. Risen, who had been with him for over a decade. Ethan, we have a problem with the Westbrook acquisition. The BOA RD is pushing back our road. They're saying the price is too steep. We need to close this deal today. Ethan's jaw tightened. The Westbrook deal was a personal project, a way to expand his empire into a new sector. It was worth billions. He had spent months on it. I'll be there in 10 minutes, Ethan said. Hanging up, he walked into the BOA room, where the directors were already seated. They were a collection of aging men in expensive suits, their faces etched with decades of ruthless deal-making. Ethan, this is an overreach, one of them said, a man named Vogel. We're paying a 50% premium for a company that's rely profitable. It's a vanity project. This is not a vanity project, Ethan said, his voice cold. This is a strategic move that will triple our revenue in 5 years. The numbers, solid. The projections, sound. They're optimistic, Vogel countered. And you're not listening to reason. Ethan felt a familiar flash of anger. He opened his mouth to respond, but then he stopped. He thought about what Mia had said. What happens when Leo gets attached to you? What happens when he starts seeing you as the father he never had? He looked at the men around the table. They were just like him. Driven, ambitious, ruthless. They saw people as obstacles or assets. They saw families as liabilities. Fine, Ethan said, his voice soft. We'll walk away from the deal. The room went silent. H.A. Risen read at him, his mouth agape. What do you mean? Walk away? We've spent millions on this. I mean, we're pulling out, Ethan said. I'm not going to fight for this. It's not worth it. He stood up and walked out, leaving the BOA room in stunned silence. He didn't know what had come over him. He had never backed down from a fight in his life. He had built an empire on his refusal to concede. But as he walked back to his office, he felt a strange sense of peace. He thought about the pancakes he'd made for Leo, the burnt, lumpy mess that had made the boy laugh. He thought about the way Mia had looked at him, not with fear or anger, but with something softer, something that looked like hope. He sat down at his desk, and read at the stack of papers in front of him. For the first time in his life, they seemed meaningless. His phone buzzed again. It was Mia. Leo is asking for you. He wants you to read him a story. Ethan smiled, a genuine, ungué-ride smile that he hadn't worn in years. Tell him I'll be there in an hour. He hung up and looked at the paperwork. He knew he should be working on the Westbrook deal, fighting to salvage it. But instead, he found himself closing his laptop and walking toward the elevator. As he stepped out of the building, the security guard looked at him with surprise. Heading out EARLY, Mr. Sterling, yes, Ethan said, his voice light. I have to read a story to my son. The guard read at him, speechless. But Ethan didn't wait for a response. He walked out into the rain, without an umbrella, and got into his car. When he arrived at the penthouse, Leo was waiting for him by the door. "Mr. Ethan," the boy shouted, running toward him. "You came. I said I would," Ethan said, as he pinged the boy up in his arms. He ride Leo to the living room and sat down on the couch, with the boy on his lap. Leo had chosen a book about dinosaurs, a colorful, worn-out paperback that he'd found in the penthouse's small library. Ethan opened the book and began to read. His voice was low, monotone, but as he read, he found himself getting lost in the story. He could see the dinosaurs in his mind, the fierce T-Rex, the gentle Brachiosaurus. It was a world of imagination, a world of childhood that he'd never known. When he finished the story, Leo looked up at him with wide eyes. "Mr. Ethan, are you going to be my daddy for real?" Ethan's heart clenched. He looked at the boy, at the hope in his eyes, and he knew he couldn't lie. "I don't know, Leo," he said, his voice gentle. "But I want to try. I want to be here for you, for your mom. For as long as you need me." Leo's face lit up. "For forever," Ethan smiled. "For forever." Mia was standing in the doorway, tears streaming down her face. She had heard everything. She had seen the vulnerable, ring side of the man she'd once despised. And she knew, in that moment, that her heart was softening. Later that night, after Leo had fallen asleep, Mia and Ethan sat on the couch, a comfortable silence between them. "What happened today?" Mia asked, her voice soft. "You were supposed to be at a board meeting. You came home early. I walked away from a deal," Ethan said, his voice distant. "A deal I had spent months on. A deal worth billions." Mia read at him, shocked. "Why, what happened?" Ethan turned to look at her, his eyes searching hers. "I realized that I was fighting for the wrong things. I was building an empire, but I had nothing real. No one to share it with. No one to see about. And now," Ethan reached out and took her hand. "Now I have you. I have Leo. I have a reason to come home." Mia felt a tear roll down her cheek. She wanted to believe him. She wanted to trust him. But the scars of the past were deep. "You destroyed my family, Ethan," she said, her voice trembling. "You took my grandmother's home. You made her life a misery. How can I trust you now?" Ethan's face fell. He knew she was right. He had done terrible things, things that could never be undone. But he also knew that he had changed, that the boy's words had shattered something inside him, something that had been holding him back. "I can't undo the past," Ethan said, his voice low. "But I can try to make it right. I can try to be a better man. For you. For Leo." He reached into his pocket and pulled out a piece of paper. It was a deed. "I'm giving you the apartment building," he said, his voice quiet. "The one your grandmother lived in. It's yours. I bought it back from the company. You can do whatever you want with it. Turn it into low-income housing. Turn it into a shelter. Sell it. It's yours." Mia read at the deed, her mind racing. She couldn't believe it. The man who had taken everything from her was giving it back. "Why?" she whispered. "Because I'm trying to be the man Leo needs me to be," Ethan said. "The man you deserve." Mia took the deed, her hands trembling. For the first time, she allowed herself to believe that maybe, just maybe, there was hope for them. The deed sat on the coffee table between them for 3 days, an object of silent contention. Mia picked it up every morning, read the legal jargon she'd rely understood, and set it back down. She didn't trust it. She didn't trust him. But every time she looked at Leo, laughing as Ethan tried to teach him how to draw a dinosaur, she felt the walls around her heart crack just a little more. On the 4th morning, she found Ethan in the kitchen at 6 a.m., ring at a frying pan with an expression of deep concentration. He was wearing a simple white t-shirt and gray sweatpants, a FA cry from the 3-piece suits he wore to the office. He had a whisk in one hand and a raton of eggs in the other, and he was reading a recipe on his phone like it was a merger agreement. "What are you doing?" Mia asked, her voice sleepy. Ethan looked up, riled. "I'm making pancakes. The good kind. The ones that don't look like charcoal." Mia couldn't help it. She laughed. It was a small, rusty sound, but it was genuine. It was the first time she had laughed since before her grandmother died. Ethan read at her, his expression shifting from concentration to wonder. "You laughed," he said, his voice soft. "I didn't think I'd ever hear that." Mia's smile faded. She looked away, EMBA rasped. It wasn't that funny. It was, Ethan said, turning back to the stove. It was the most beautiful sound I've ever he wrote. The silence stretched between them, heavy with unspoken words. Mia watched him pour the batter into the pan, his movements ca-reful, deliberate. He was trying so hard. It was almost painful to watch. Why are you doing this? She asked. Her voice rely above a whisper. You could have anyone. You could have 1,000 women who would kill to be in my position. Why are you wasting your time on me, on a homeless woman with a sick kid and a mountain of baggage? Ethan turned to face her. His expression was serious, his eyes dark with emotion. Because I spent my whole life around people who only wanted what I could give them. Money, power, status. Leo is the first person who ever looked at me and saw a person. Not a bank account. Not a ladder to climb. Just a man. And you looked at me the same way your grandmother did. With honesty. With pain. With a refusal to pretend I was anything other than what I am. He set down the whisk and walked toward her. I'm not a good man, Mia. I've done terrible things. I've ruined lives. I broke your grandmother's heart. But I'm trying to be better. And I need you to give me a chance to prove it. Mia's eyes glistened with unshed tears. I don't know if I can. Every time I look at you, I see her. I see the way she cried when she got the eviction notice. I see the way she held onto her chair as the movers took her things. Then let me replace those memories, Ethan said, his voice intense. Let me make new ones. Ones that don't hurt. Please. Before Mia could answer, Leo came running into the kitchen, his pajamas rumpled and his hair sticking up in every direction. Mr. Ethan, are you making pancakes? I could smell them from my room. Ethan's face softened immediately. He knelt down and scoped Leo into his arms. I sure am, little man. And this time, they're not going to be burnt. I promise. Leo giggled. You said that last time. And I meant it last time. Ethan said, his voice mock serious. I just underestimated the power of the stove. Mia watched them, her heart aching. She saw the way Leo looked at Ethan, with pure, unadulterated trust. She saw the way Ethan held him, like he was the most precious thing in the world. And for the first time, she allowed herself to believe that maybe, just maybe, there was a future here. Breakfast was a chaotic affair. The pancakes were slightly better than the first batch, though still lopsided and uneven. Leo ate 3 of them, his face SMA red with syrup, and demanded a 4th. Ethan, looking delighted, obliged. Okay, Mia said, wiping Leo's face with a napkin. We need to talk about school. Leo hasn't been enrolled in a regular school since we lost the APA remit. He's been doing worksheets at the shelter, but he's falling behind. Ethan nodded, his expression turning serious. I've already taken CA of it. There's a private school a few blocks from here. Brookhaven Academy. I spoke to the headmaster. Leo STARTS on Monday. Mia STA read at him, her mouth open. You what? How did you? We haven't even talked about this. I'm not going to let Leo fall behind, Ethan said, his voice firm. I've seen what happens to kids who get left behind. They spend their whole lives playing catch-up. That's not going to happen to him. Not on my watch. Mia shook her head, frustration building. You can't just make decisions like that. You're not his father. You're not my husband. You're a stranger who picked us up off the street. The words hung in the air, sharp and painful. Ethan's expression flickered, a flash of hurt crossing his face before he masked it. You're right, he said, his voice flat. I'm not his father. I'm just a stranger. But I'm a stranger who wants to help. If you'd rather take your chances on the street, that's your choice. But I'm not going to stand by and watch a 5-year-old child suffer because of pride. The confrontation left Mia shaken. She retreated to her room, her mind racing. She knew Ethan was right. She knew Leo needed stability. But accepting help from the man who had destroyed her family felt like a betrayal of her grandmother's memory. A knock on the door interrupted her thoughts. It was Ethan. He looked subdued, his eyes shadowed with regret. I'm sorry, he said, his voice quiet. I shouldn't have pushed. I have a tendency to bulldoze through things. It's how I run my business. But I forget that people rent businesses. Mia nodded, not meeting his eyes. It's okay. I overreacted. It's just, everything is so fast. A few weeks ago, I was sleeping in a laundromat. Now I'm in a penthouse with a billionaire who wants to send my son to private school. It's a lot. I know, Ethan said. And I'm sorry for rushing. But there's something I need to show you. Something that might help you understand why I'm doing all this. He led her to a small room in the back of the penthouse. It had been locked the entire time they'd been there, and Mia had never bothered to ask about it. Ethan pulled out a key and opened the door. The room was a shrine. Photographs covered every wall, old and faded, of a woman and a small boy. The boy was Ethan, no more than 6 or 7 years old. The woman was his mother. She was beautiful, with the same dark eyes and sharp cheekbones that Ethan had. In the photos, she was always smiling, always holding on to him like he was the only thing in the world that mattered. "That's my mother," Ethan said, his voice thick. "She died when I was 10. The only thing my father ever gave me was a cold, empty house and a trust fund. She was the only person who ever loved me unconditionally. And she was taken away." Mia looked at the photos, her heart aching. She saw the way Ethan's mother looked at him, the same way she looked at Leo. The same fierce, protective love. "When I saw Leo on that street corner," Ethan continued, "I saw myself. A little boy who needed someone to see him, who needed someone to protect him. And I couldn't walk away. I couldn't be my father." Mia reached out and touched his arm. The first voluntary contact she'd made with him since the night they'd met. "You're not your father, Ethan. You're nothing like him." Ethan turned to look at her, his eyes glistening. "Then give me a chance. Let me prove it. Let me be the father that Leo needs. Let me be the man you deserve." Mia looked at the photographs, at the ghost of a mother who had loved her son with everything she had. And she made a decision. "Okay," she said, her voice soft. "But we do this my way. No more surprises. We talk about things first. We make decisions together. Do you understand?" Ethan nodded, a look of relief washing over his face. "Together. I can do that." The next week was a whirlwind. Leo sta root school, his first day a mixture of terror and excitement. He came home with a backpack full of assignments and a smile so wide it looked like it might split his face. "They have a playground, Mama," he said, his voice bubbling with excitement. "And a library with so many books. And a teacher named Ms. Chun who said I'm really smart." Mia felt T.R.S. prick her eyes. She hugged him tight. "I'm so proud of you, baby." Ethan watched from the doorway, his expression soft. He had been making a conscious effort to step back, to let Mia take the lead. It was hard for him, a man used to controlling every aspect of his life. But he was Leo reneged that evening. After Leo had gone to bed, Ethan and Mia sat on the balcony, looking out at the city lights. The air was so and crisp, and Mia had wrapped herself in one of Ethan's expensive cashmere blankets. "The board is asking questions," Ethan said, his voice low. "They want to know why I've been missing meetings. Why I've been leaving the office EARLY. They've noticed I've changed." "Have you?" Mia asked. That Ethan considered the question. "I don't know. I think I'm just less interested. In the deals. The money. The power. It all seems so empty now." He turned to look at her. "What about you? Are you happy here with me?" Mia was silent for a long moment. She thought about her grandmother, about the apartment she'd lost, about the life she'd been forced to leave behind. She thought about Leo, safe and warm and happy. She thought about Ethan, who had given them everything without asking for anything in return. "I'm rooting to be," she said, her voice honest. Ethan nodded, a faint smile crossing his lips. "That's more than I deserve." He reached out and took her hand, his touch gentle. Mia didn't pull away. For the first time in years, she felt like she was exactly where she was supposed to be. But the peace was shattered the next morning. Ethan's phone rang at 6 a.m., and when he answered, his face went white. "What do you mean?" "The deal is back on," he said, his voice sharp. "I canceled it." The board approved the cancellation. A pause. Then, "Vogel is making a power play." "Of course he is. I'll be there in an hour." He hung up and turned to Mia, his expression grim. "I have to go. There's a situation at the office. Some of the board members are trying to undermine me. They're pushing to reinstate the Westbrook deal, and they're threatening to call a vote of no confidence." Mia felt a chill run down her spine. "What does that mean?" "It means," Ethan said, his voice tight, "that I could lose my company. Everything I've built. Everything I've worked for." "But you walked away from the deal," Mia said, her voice trembling. "You did it for us." Ethan looked at her, his eyes filled with a mixture of regret and determination. "I know. and I don't regret it. But there are people who have been waiting for a chance to take me down. And it looks like I just handed them one. He grabbed his coat and headed for the door. But before he left, he turned back to look at her. Whatever happens, Mia, he said, his voice firm. I don't regret it. I don't regret any of it. Leo asked me to be his daddy, and I said yes. That's a promise I intend to keep. He walked out the door, leaving Mia standing in the middle of the penthouse, her heart pounding in her chest. She had spent her whole life fighting, first for her grandmother, then for Leo. And now, it seemed, she had to fight for Ethan. The elevator doors slid shut, and Mia stood alone in the penthouse, the silence pressing in on her. She could still feel the ghost of Ethan's hand in hers, the weight of his words hanging in the air. He was going to fight for them. But what if he lost? What if they took everything from him the way he had taken everything from her grandmother? The irony was bitter and sharp. She walked to the window, and Sta read down at the city below. Somewhere out there, Ethan was walking into a boa room full of RKS. And she was powerless to help him. Her phone buzzed on the counter. A text from an unknown number. You think you've won, don't you? You think you've trapped him with your sob story and your brat. But I've been watching, and I know exactly how to end this. Mia's blood ran cold. She read the message again, her hands trembling. Who was this? How did they get her number? She looked around the penthouse, suddenly feeling exposed, vulnerable. The floor-to-ceiling windows that had once seemed so glamorous now felt like a cage. Another message. Sterling Global doesn't belong to some soft-root fool who gets distracted by street trash. It belongs to people who understand business. People like me. Mia's mind raced. Vogel. It had to be Vogel. The BOA RD member who had been pushing against Ethan. The one who was threatening the vote of no confidence. He was trying to intimidate her, to re her into leaving. She wanted to call Ethan, to warn him. But she knew he was in the middle of a battle, and he couldn't afford to be distracted. She had to handle this herself. Leo came running into the room, his backpack slung over one shoulder. Mama, I'm ready for school. Ms. Chun said we're going to Leah RN about space today. I'm going to be an astronaut. Mia forced a smile, shoving her phone into her pocket. That's amazing, baby. Let me get your lunch. She packed his bag, her hands still shaking. She kissed him goodbye and watched as the nanny, a kind woman named Mrs. Patterson, let him out the door. The moment the door clicked shut, she pulled out her phone again. 3 more messages had arrived. They were increasingly threatening, filled with vitriol and accusations. You're a gold digger. You're using that kid to manipulate him. When this is over, you'll be back on the street where you belong. Mia felt a cold fury building inside her. She had spent her whole life being pushed around, being told she wasn't good enough, being treated like Ga Rebage. She had watched her grandmother die from a broken heart. She had slept in shelters and laundromats. She had vet herself so Leo could eat. And she had never, not once, asked for anything from anyone. She typed a response. I don't know who you are, but I'm not afraid of you. I didn't ask for any of this. I didn't ask to be rescued. I'm here because a little boy saw a man who needed a family. If you have a problem with that, you can say it to my face. She hit send before she could second-guess herself. The response was immediate. Brave words for a woman who can't even hold down a job. You think he'll protect you when the BOA RD turns on him? You think he'll choose you over his empire? He's a Sterling. And Sterlings always choose power. Mia read at the screen. The words cut deep because they echoed her own Fia RS. Was she just a distraction, a temporary fascination for a man who had everything? Would he really choose her and Leo over the company he'd spent his life building? She didn't have an answer. But she knew one thing. She wasn't going to run. She had spent too long running. It was time to fight. Across town, Ethan stood at the head of the Boa room table, facing down a room full of hostile faces. Vogel sat at the opposite end, a smug smile playing at the corners of his mouth. This is a coup, Ethan said, his voice dangerously calm. You're trying to push me out because I did something you didn't agree with. We're trying to protect the company, Vogel replied, his voice smooth. The Westbrook deal was a golden opportunity, and you threw it away. For what? A homeless woman and her Basta RD child. Ethan's fist slammed on the table. Watch your mouth. Vogel's smile widened. Hit a nerve, did I? It's funny, Ethan. You've spent your whole life being the coldest man in the room. You've crushed everyone who stood in your way. And now, suddenly, you have a conscience. You think any of us believe that? I don't see what you believe, Ethan said, his voice low. I made a choice, and I stand by it. A choice that could cost us billions. Another BOA RD member interjected. We have a responsibility to the Shari holders, to the employees. You can't just throw that away because you've got a soft spot for a charity case. The words stung, but Ethan didn't flinch. He looked around the room, at the faces of men he'd once respected, men who had been his allies. They were all looking at him like he was a liability. Here's the thing, Ethan said, his voice cutting through the tension. I know each and every one of you has secrets. You think I don't know about the offshore accounts, the kickbacks, the embezzlement? I've been building this company for 20 years. I know where the bodies are reburied. And if you push me out, I'll take all of you down with me. The room went silent. Vogel's smile faltered. You're bluffing. Am I? Ethan asked, pulling out his phone. I've got files on every single person in this room. I've been collecting them for years. I didn't want to use them, but if you force my hand, I will. He scrolled through the phone and held it up. Risen, you've been skimming from the pension fund. You think I didn't notice the discrepancies, Davis? You've been sleeping with your secretary and using company funds to pay for her APA remit. And Vogel, well, Vogel, you've been king the books for years. Vogel's face went pale. That's a lie. Is it? Ethan said, his voice cold. I've got the receipts. Literally. So here's what's going to happen. You're going to call off the vote of no confidence. You're going to support me publicly. And if I ever hear a whisper of dissent again, I will release everything to the press. Do you understand? The silence stretched for an eternity. Then, one by one, the BOA RD members nodded. Vogel's face contorted with rage, but he said nothing. That Ethan walked out of the BOA Rudrum, his heart pounding in his chest. He had won, but at what cost? He had threatened his own people, exposed their secrets, destroyed the trust they'd built over decades. He had become his father. He stood in the hallway, his hands shaking. His phone buzzed. It was Mia. I need to see you. It's urgent. Ethan's heart sank. He had just fought a war to keep his company, and now something was wrong at home. He got into his car and drove back to the penthouse, his mind racing with worst-case scenarios. When he walked in, Mia was standing in the middle of the living room, her face pale. She held out her phone. Read these. Ethan took the phone and scrolled through the messages. His expression darkened with each word. Who sent these? I don't know, Mia said, her voice trembling. But I think it's Vogel. He's trying to re me off. He's trying to break us apart. Ethan's jaw tightened. He won't get away with this. I'll have him investigated. I'll have him fired. No, Mia said, cutting him off. You can't. You just threatened the entire BOA RD to keep your job. If you go after Vogel now, it'll look like retaliation. It'll make you look weak. Ethan read at her, surprised. You're defending him. I'm not defending anyone, Mia said, her voice firm. I'm saying you can't fight every battle the same way. You can't just bulldoze through. Sometimes you have to be smart. Sometimes you have to be strategic. Ethan let out a breath he didn't realize he'd been holding. You're right. Of course you're right. I'm sorry. Seeing those messages, the thought of anyone threatening you or Leo. I know, Mia said, stepping closer. I'm not afraid of him, and I'm not going to leave. But we need to be refull. He's not going to give up. Ethan reached out and pulled her into his arms. I won't let anything happen to you. I swear. She hugged him back, her body trembling. I know. I believe you. I trust you. Leo came home from school, bursting through the door with a painting of a rocket ship. Mr. Ethan, look what I made. Ethan knelt down to examine the painting, his face softening. That's incredible, Leo. You're going to be a famous artist someday. Leo giggled. No, I'm going to be an astronaut. Ms. Chen said I'm really good at math, but maybe I can be both. An astronaut, artist. Ethan laughed, a genuine wah-rm sound. I think that's the best idea I've ever heard. Mia watched them, her heart full. She knew the danger wasn't over. Vogel was still out there, plotting his next move. But in this moment, with her son laughing and Ethan holding his painting like it was a treasure, she felt a sense of peace she hadn't felt in years. That night, after Leo was asleep, Mia and Ethan sat on the balcony. The city lights twinkled below them, a reminder of the empire Ethan had built and almost lost. I've been thinking, Ethan said, his voice quiet. About what I did today? The threats, the intimidation. I became the man I swore I'd never be. You did what you had to do, Mia said. You protected us. You protected your company. But at what cost? Ethan asked, his voice strained. I used the same tactics my father used. I manipulated people. I blackmailed them. I became everything I hate. Mia reached out and took his hand. You're not your father, Ethan. You didn't do it for power. You did it for us. That's the difference. Ethan turned to look at her, his eyes filled with uncertainty. Do you really believe that? Do you really believe I'm different? I know you're different, Mia said, her voice soft. I've seen the way you treat Leo. I've seen the way you look at me. You're not the man I met on that street corner. You're someone else entirely. Someone I'm rooting to, someone I re about. The words hung in the air, fragile and new. Ethan's hand tightened around hers. I re about you too, Mia, he said, his voice thick. More than I've ever read about anything. And I'm terrified, because I've never had anything to lose before. And now I have everything. Mia felt T.R.S. prick her eyes. Me too. They sat in silence, the weight of their words settling between them. For the first time, they were both willing to admit what they felt. It was terrifying and exhilarating, and everything in between. A sound from inside the penthouse made them both turn. Leo was standing in the doorway, rubbing his eyes. I had a night of Mayri. Can I sleep with you tonight? Ethan looked at Mia, a question in his eyes. She nodded. Of course, little man. Ethan said, ping Leo into his arms. Come on. We'll make a fort in the living room. A rocket ship fort. Leo's eyes lit up. Really, really, Ethan said, eyeing him inside. Mia followed, watching as Ethan and Leo worked together to build a fort out of blankets and pillows. It was a simple moment, but it felt monumental. She was watching her family come together, piece by piece. The Vogel's threats still loomed in the back of her mind. But in this moment, surrounded by the people she loved, she felt invincible. The fort was a masterpiece of childhood engineering, a sprawling kingdom of quilts and couch cushions that took over the entire living room. Leo had fallen asleep in the middle of it, curled up with his rocket ship painting clutched to his chest, his small face peaceful in the dim glow of the city lights filtering through the windows. Ethan had stayed up with him, reading dinosaur books in a low voice until the boys' breathing evened out into the soft rhythm of sleep. Mia watched from the doorway, her heart aching with a tenderness she didn't know how to name. When she finally dragged herself away to her own room, she found her phone lit up with a new message. The number was different this time, but the tone was unmistakable. You think a blanket fort changes anything? You think he'll still want you when the novelty wears off? I've known Ethan for 20 years. He gets bored fast, and when he does, you and your kid will be back on the sidewalk where I found you. Mia's hand tightened around the phone. She wanted to throw it against the wall, to scream, to wake Ethan and show him what Vogel was still doing. But she remembered what she'd said. Liar. You can't fight every battle the same way. Sometimes you have to be smart. She typed a single word. Prove it. Then she turned off her phone and went to sleep. The next morning, Ethan was in the kitchen again, this time attempting scrambled eggs. He was wearing an apron that said Kiss the COK in bold red letters, a gift Leo had insisted on buying from the school's fundraising sale. Mia couldn't help but smile at the sight of him, the most powerful man in the city, covered in flour and looking utterly out of his depth. Don't laugh, he said, pointing a spatula at her. I'm making progress. Progress, she repeated, raising an eyebrow. Is that what you call that black stuff in the pan? Ethan looked down at the eggs, which had somehow turned a strange shade of brown. Okay, maybe not progress, but I'm persistent. That counts for something. Leo came running in, still in his pajamas, his hair a wild mess. Mr. Ethan, are you making breakfast? Can I help? Absolutely, Ethan said, scooping him up and setting him on the counter. You're going to be my official taste tester. If you don't throw up, we're good. Mia laughed, a genuine, full-bodied laugh that surprised even her. She had forgotten what it felt like to be happy, to feel like she belonged somewhere. It was a strange and wonderful feeling. Breakfast was a disaster. The eggs were inedible, the toast was burnt, and Leo somehow managed to get syrup in his hair. But they ate it anyway, laughing and making jokes, and for a few precious hours, the world outside the penthouse ceased to exist. After breakfast, Ethan got a call from H.A. Risen. His expression shifted from relaxed to tense in seconds. What do you mean? The police a re here, he said, his voice Shah RP. What Cha Ridges? I haven't done anything. Mia's RT stopped. She watched as Ethan listened, his face going pale. All right, he said finally. I'll be there in 20 minutes. Don't say anything to anyone. He hung up and turned to Mia. H.A. Risen says the police a re at the office. They have a warrant. They're investigating allegations of fraud and embezzlement. Fraud, Mia repeated, her voice rising. But you didn't do anything. You just exposed Vogel for doing exactly that. I know, Ethan said, his jaw tight. But someone has to take the fall. And Vogel has made it very clear who he wants that someone to be. He grabbed his coat and headed for the door. Mia followed him, her heart pounding. I'm coming with you. She said, no. Ethan said firmly. You're staying here with Leo. I won't put you in danger. I'm already in danger, Mia said, her voice fierce. Those messages, the threats, the investigation. This is all connected. And I'm not going to sit here and wait for something to happen. I'm going with you. Ethan Estier read at her for a long moment, his eyes searching hers. Then he nodded. Fine, but stay behind me. And don't say anything to anyone. Let me handle this. They dropped Leo off at school, promising to pick him up EARLY. Ethan drove to Sterling Global in silence, his knuckles white on the steering wheel. When they arrived, the lobby was SWA, remained with police officers. They were everywhere, going through files, interviewing employees, sealing off offices. A detective approached them, a tall man with a tired face and weary eyes. Mr. Sterling, I'm Detective Reyes. We have a warrant to CRCH your office and seize any relevant documents. What are the Cha Ridges? Ethan asked, his voice controlled. Allegations of financial fraud, embezzlement, and racketeering, Reyes said. The complaint was filed anonymously, but it's detailed. Whoever did this knew exactly where to look. Ethan nodded, his expression unreadable. I have nothing to hide. Take whatever you need. Mia watched as the officers descended on Ethan's office. They opened filing cabinets, seized computers, boxed up evidence. It was like watching someone dismantle her grandmother's APA mint all over again. The same helplessness, the same sense of injustice. She noticed a man standing in the corner of the lobby, watching the chaos with a smirk on his face. It was Vogel. He was leaning against a pillar a RMS crossed, looking like he was enjoying a private joke. Mia's blood boiled. Shima urged over to him, her eyes blazing. You did this, she said, her voice low. You set him up. Vogel's smirk widened. I have no idea what you're talking about. I'm just a concerned BOA RD member who wants to see the company run properly. Don't play games with me, Mia said, her voice shaking with rage. I know it was you. The messages, the threats, the investigation. You're trying to destroy him. And if I am, Vogel said, stepping closer. What are you going to do about it? You're nobody. You're a street rat who got lucky. But luck runs out. And when it does, you'll be exactly where you belong. Mia felt a cold fury settle over her. She had been bullied her whole life, pushed around by landlords, employers, and strangers who thought she was worthless. But she had never, not once, backed down from a fight. And she wasn't going to START now. Listen to me, she said, her voice dropping to a whisper. I've survived things you can't even imagine. I've slept on arcade benches. I've gone days without eating. I've watched my grandmother die from a broken heart, and I'm still standing. So if you think a few threats going to SCA me, you're wrong. If you think you can take Ethan down, you're wrong. And if you think you're going to win, you're wrong. I will fight you every step of the way. And I will win. Vogel STA read at her, his smirk fading. For the first time, he looked uncertain. A voice cut through the tension. Mia. She turned to see Ethan standing behind her. He had a folder in his hand, his expression grim. Come with me, he said, his voice quiet. They walked to a conference room, away from the chaos of the lobby. Ethan closed the door and leaned against the table, his head bowed. This is bad, he said. They're going to freeze my accounts. They're going to seize my assets. I could lose everything. Then we fight, Mia said, her voice fierce. We don't give up. We don't back down. Ethan looked at her, a sad smile on his face. You're something else. You know that most people would have run by now. But you're still here. Where else would I go, Mia said. This is my family now. You and Leo. And I'm not going to let anyone T or at APART. Ethan reached out and took her hand. I don't deserve you. Probably not, she said, a ghost of a smile on her lips. But you've got me anyway. They walked out of the conference room together, ready to face whatever came next. But as they stepped into the lobby, a commotion drew their attention. A young woman was standing in the middle of the chaos, her face pale, her hands trembling. She was holding a piece of paper, and she looked like she was about to collapse. What's going on? Mia asked. Her voice RP'd out the woman. A junior accountant named S.A. Ra looked at Ethan with wide eyes. Mr. Sterling, I'm so sorry. I didn't know. I didn't realize what I was doing. They said it was a routine audit. They said it was just paperwork. I didn't know they were going to use it against you. Ethan's expression keened. Who? S.A. Ra's gaze flicked to Vogel, who was still standing in the corner. He told me to do it. He said it was for the good of the company. He said you were going to destroy everything. I didn't know. I swear I didn't know. The confession hung in the air like a bomb. Vogel's face went white, then red with fury. She's lying, he snapped. She's a disgruntled employee trying to cover her own mistakes. She's telling the truth, Mia said, her voice ringing out. I've seen the texts, the threats, the intimidation. Vogel has been trying to take Ethan down for weeks. And he's been using you, all of you, to do it. Detective Reyes stepped forward, his eyes narrowing. Is that true, Mr. Vogel? Vogel's composure cracked. This is absurd. You can't believe a word she says. She's a nobody, a gold digger. She's been manipulating Ethan from the start. But Mia wasn't backing down. She pulled out her phone and scrolled through the messages. Here, read these. They're from Vogel. He's been threatening me, trying to scare me into leaving. He's been orchestrating everything. Reyes took the phone and read the messages. His expression hardened. Mr. Vogel, I'm going to need you to come with me. Vogel's face contorted with rage. You can't do this. I'm a BOA RD member. I have rights. You have the right to remain silent, Reyes said, pulling out handcuffs. And I suggest you use it. As the detective led Vogel away, the lobby erupted into a frenzy of whispers and murmurs. Mia stood in the middle of it, her heart pounding. She had done it. She had fought back. And she had won. Ethan walked over to her, his eyes filled with a mixture of awe and gratitude. I don't know what to say. You just saved my life. I just did what was right, Mia said, her voice soft. I couldn't let him get away with it. Not after everything he did. Ethan pulled her into his arms, holding her tight. I love you, he said, the words escaping before he could stop them. I know it's too soon. I know we haven't known each other long enough. But I love you. And I'm not going to let anything happen to you ever again. Mia felt TRS prick her eyes. I love you too. I didn't think I would. I didn't think I could. But I do. They stood there, wrapped in each other's arms, as the chaos of the investigation swirled around them. For the first time in a long time, Mia felt like she was exactly where she was supposed to be. The fallout from Vogel's arrest was immediate and chaotic. News outlets descended on Sterling Global like vultures, cameras flashing, reporters shouting questions. Ethan had to issue a statement from the conference room, his voice steady but his eyes betraying the exhaustion that had settled deep into his bones. Mr. Sterling, are you aware of the extent of the embezzlement? Mr. Sterling, will you be stepping down during the investigation? Mr. Sterling, is it true you've been involved with a homeless woman and her child? The last question hit like a physical blow. Mia, standing just off camera, felt the blood drain from her face. She watched Ethan's expression shift, a flicker of cold fury passing through his eyes before he masked it. My personal life is not relevant to this investigation, he said, his voice ice. What is relevant is that a member of my BOA RD has been arrested for fraud and intimidation. I will be parading fully with the authorities, and I expect the truth to come out. He stepped away from the podium, his hand finding Mia's in the chaos. We're leaving. Now. They slipped out through a service entrance, the paparazzi still SWing, remaining the front of the building. Ethan's driver was waiting, and they sped away, the city blurring past the tinted windows. I'm sorry, Ethan said, his voice tight. I should have protected you from that. I should have known they'd dig into your past. It's not your fault, Mia said, though her voice was trembling. I knew what I was signing up for. I just didn't think it would be so public. Ethan reached over and took her hand. It's going to get worse before it gets better. But I promise you, I will do everything in my power to keep you and Leo safe. They arrived at the penthouse to find Leo waiting with Mrs. Patterson, his face bright with excitement. Mama, Mr. Ethan, did you see me on the news? I waved at the camera. Mia forced a smile. You did. That's wonderful, baby. Leo ran to Ethan, grabbing his hand. Mr. Ethan, can we watch CA returns? I want to see if I'm on TV again. Ethan laughed, a hollow sound but genuine. Of course, little man. Let's see if you're famous. They settled onto the couch, Leo curled up between them, his eyes glued to the screen. The news was still covering the story, but they switched to a CA return channel. The bright colors and silly voices a welcome reprieve from the chaos outside. Later that night, after Leo had gone to bed, Ethan and Mia sat on the balcony, the city lights twinkling below them. The silence was heavy, filled with unspoken FRS. I've been thinking, Ethan said, his voice quiet. Maybe you and Leo should leave. Just for a while. Until this blows over. Mia turned to look at him, her eyes wide. Leave? Where would we go? I don't know. Ethan said, running a hand through his hair. Somewhere safe. Somewhere the press can't find you. I have a cabin upstate. It's remote. Private. You could stay there until everything settles down. And what about you? Mia asked, her voice sharp. You want us to run away while you stay here and fight this alone? I'm the one they're after. Ethan said, his voice strained. If they can't get to me, they'll go after you. They'll use you and Leo to hurt me. I can't let that happen. Mia shook her head, her jaw set. No, I'm not leaving. I didn't run when Vogel was threatening me. I'm not running now. We're in this together, remember? Ethan looked at her, his eyes filled with a mixture of frustration and admiration. You're impossible, you know that. So I've been told, she said, a ghost of a smile on her lips. But I'm also stubborn, and I'm not going anywhere. He reached out and cupped her face in his hands. I don't deserve you. Stop saying that, she said, her voice soft. You deserve happiness. You deserve love. You deserve to have a family. And I'm going to make sure you get all of it. He kissed her then, a soft, tender kiss that said more than words ever could. When they pulled apart, Mia saw TRS in his eyes. I love you, he whispered. I know it's fast. I know it doesn't make sense. But I love you. I love you too, she said, her voice breaking. And I'm not going to let anyone take that away. The investigation dragged on for weeks. Ethan was questioned multiple times, his lawyers working around the clock to clear his name. Vogel's arrest had exposed a network of corruption within the company, and several other executives were implicated. The media had a field day, painting Ethan as both a victim and a villain depending on the outlet. Mia tried to keep a normal routine for Leo. She took him to school, made him dinner, read him bedtime stories. But the strain was evident in the dark circles under her eyes and the way she jumped at every unexpected noise. One afternoon, she received a letter in the mail. It was from the apartment building, the one her grandmother had lived in, the one Ethan had given her. The letter was from a tenant, a woman named Mrs. Chun, who had known Mia's grandmother for decades. Mia, the letter read. I heard about everything that's happened. Your grandmother would be so proud of you. She always said you were a fighter. I wanted to let you know that we're all rooting for you. The building is doing well, thanks to Mr. Sterling's generosity. We're turning it into a community center, a place for people who need help. Your grandmother's legacy lives on. Stay strong. We believe in you. Mia read the letter 3 times, TRS streaming down her face. Her grandmother had always believed in her. And now, in a way, she was still watching over her. She showed the letter to Ethan that evening. I want to do something, she said. Something meaningful. I want to go back to the building to see what they've done. I want to help. Ethan looked at her, a small smile on his face. I think that's a wonderful idea. I'll take you there myself. The next day, they drove to the old neighborhood. The building looked different from how Mia remembered it. The facade had been cleaned, the windows replaced. A new sign hung above the entrance, Sterling Community Center. Mrs. Chun was waiting for them at the door, her face creased with a warm smile. Mia, you came. And Mr. Sterling. Welcome, welcome. She led them inside, showing them the newly renovated rooms. There was a childcare center, a small clinic, a kitchen where volunteers served hot meals to anyone who needed them. The walls were lined with photos of the residents, a tribute to the community that had been built there. Your grandmother's apartment is still there, Mrs. Chun said, her voice soft. We turned it into a memorial, a place where people can come and remember what she stood for. Mia walked to the apartment, her feet moving on autopilot. The door was open, and she stepped inside. The walls had been painted a soft yellow, her grandmother's favorite color. There were photos of her everywhere, the same photos Mia had kept in her own small collection. In the center of the room was a chair, the same chair her grandmother had sat in every day, the one she had refused to leave during the eviction. Mia sank into the chair, tears streaming down her face. She could almost feel her grandmother's presence, her comforting voice. Grandma, she whispered, I did it. I made it. And I have a family now. A real family. You would have loved them. Ethan stood in the doorway, watching her. He didn't say anything, just let her have her moment. And when Mia finally stood up, she walked over to him and took his hand. Thank you, she said, for everything. For giving me back this place. For giving me a home. For loving me. Ethan pulled her into his arms. I would do it all again. 1,000 times over. They walked out of the building together, hand in hand. The sun was setting, casting a golden glow over the city. For the first time in a long time, Mia felt like she was exactly where she was supposed to be. But as they got into the car, Ethan's phone buzzed. He read the message, and his face went pale. What is it? Mia asked, her heart racing. It's the police, Ethan said, his voice hollow. They found something. Something that changes everything. Mia felt a chill run down her spine. What did they find? Ethan looked at her, his eyes filled with a mixture of shock and disbelief. They found evidence that Vogel wasn't working alone. Someone else was involved. Someone from inside the company. Someone who knew everything. Who? Mia asked, her voice rely above a whisper. Ethan hesitated, his jaw tightening. The evidence points to someone I trusted. Someone I've known for years. Someone who's been with me from the beginning. Mia's mind raced. Who? Ethan, he looked at her, his eyes dark with betrayal. H.A. Risen. My CFO. My best friend. He was the one behind it all. H.A. Risen, Mia repeated, her voice rely a whisper. Your CFO, the one who's been with you for years. Ethan's hands were gripping the steering wheel, so hard his knuckles had gone white. 15 years. We built this company together. He was the first person I hired. He stood beside me through every deal, every acquisition, every crisis. He was my right hand. But why? Mia asked, her mind reeling. Why would he do this? What could he possibly gain? Ethan shook his head, his expression a mixture of disbelief and devastation. I don't know. Money, maybe. Power. Or maybe he just wanted to watch me fall. I don't know anymore. I thought I knew him. I trusted him with everything. The drive back to the penthouse was silent, the weight of the revelation pressing down on both of them. Mia couldn't stop thinking about H.A. Risen. She'd met him a few times, a quiet, unassuming man with kind eyes and a gentle smile. He'd always been polite to her, even friendly. She never would have guessed he was capable of such betrayal. When they arrived, Ethan went straight to the study, his movements mechanical. He poured himself a glass of whiskey and read out the window, his back to her. I need to call my lawyers, he said, his voice flat. I need to figure out what to do next. Ethan, Mia said, stepping closer. Talk to me. Don't shut me out. He turned to look at her, and she saw the pain in his eyes. It was raw, unfiltered. He wasn't the cold, controlled CEO she'd met on that rainy street corner. He was just a man who had been betrayed by someone he loved. How do you do it? He asked, his voice breaking. How do you keep going? How do you trust anyone after everything you've been through? Mia walked over and took his hand. Because I have to. Because if I stop trusting, I stop living. And I've come too far to give up now. He set down his glass and pulled her into his arms. I don't know what I'd do without you. You don't have to find out, she said, her voice soft. I'm not going anywhere. The next morning, Ethan's lawyers arrived at the penthouse. They were a team of efficient men and women who had been with him through every legal battle of his career. They spread documents across the dining table, their faces grim. The evidence is damning, one of them said, a woman named Ms. Chun. We found a trail of financial transactions linking H.A. Risen to Vogel. He's been embezzling funds for years, siphoning money into offshore accounts. He He was the one who redacted the fraudulent documents, the false reports, everything. Ethan nodded, his expression unreadable. Is there any way to prove I wasn't involved? We're working on it, Ms. Chen said. But H.A. Risen was your CFO. He had access to everything. The prosecution is going to argue that you must have known, that you were either complicit or negligent. Mia felt her blood run cold. Is there anything we can do, Ms. Chen hesitated. There is one thing. H.A. Risen has been parading with the prosecution in exchange for a reduced sentence. He's been giving them information, trying to paint Ethan as the mastermind behind the whole scheme. But there's a chance we could flip him. If we can get him to admit that Ethan was unaware of the fraud, we could build a strong defense. How do we do that? Mia asked. We need to talk to him, Ms. Chen said. Find out what he wants, what he's really after. Ethan shook his head. He won't talk to me. He's been avoiding me since the investigation sta route. Then let me try, Mia said. Ethan turned to look at her, his eyes wide. No, absolutely not. I'm not putting you in HRM's way. Ethan, I'm already in HRM's way, she said, her voice firm. I've been threatened, harassed, and dragged through the media. If I can help you, I want to. Let me do this. He read at her for a long moment, then nodded slowly. All right, but I'm coming with you. And if anything goes wrong, we leave immediately. Later that day, they drove to the county jail where H.A. Risen was being held. The building was cold and institutional, the walls painted a drab gray. Mia felt a shiver run down her spine as they walked through the metal detectors and into the visiting array. H.A. Risen was already there, sitting behind a glass partition. He looked different from the man she remembered. His face was gaunt, his eyes hollow. He was wearing an orange jumpsuit, his hands cuffed to the table. Ethan sat down across from him, his jaw tight. H.A. Risen. Mia, H.A. Risen said, his voice soft. I didn't expect to see you here. I didn't expect to be here, she said, her voice steady. But I need to talk to you. H.A. Risen's eyes flickered to Ethan. What do you want? I want to know why, Ethan said, his voice cold. 15 years. You were like a brother to me. Why would you do this? H.A. Risen looked down at his hands, a bitter smile on his lips. You want to know why? Because I was tired of being your shadow. Everything I did, you took credit for. Every idea I had, you turned into your own. I was the one who made Sterling Global what it is, but you got all the glory. You got everything. You were my partner, Ethan said, his voice rising. We built this together. I never took credit for your work. I never tried to push you out. Not openly, no. H.A. Risen said, his voice bitter. But you never missed an opportunity to remind me who was in RGE. You made me feel small, Ethan. You made me feel like I was nothing. Mia watched the exchange, her heart aching. She saw the pain in H.A. Risen's eyes, the of resentment that had festered into something ugly and destructive. She remembered the same feeling, the same helplessness, the same frustration. H.A. Risen, she said, her voice gentle. I know what it's like to feel invisible, to feel like no one sees you. But what you did, it wasn't just about revenge. It was about destroying someone who trusted you. And that's not something you can come back from. H.A. Risen looked at her, his eyes glistening. You don't know what it's like. You don't know what he did to me. Maybe I don't, Mia said. But I know what it's like to lose everything. My grandmother died because of what Ethan did. I slept on arcade benches to keep my son safe. I know what it's like to be pushed to the edge. But I chose to fight. I chose to keep going. And you had a choice too. You could have walked away. You could have sta root over. Instead, you chose to destroy. H.A. Risen's face crumbled. I didn't mean for it to go this far. I just wanted him to know what it felt like. I didn't want to hurt anyone else. But you did, Mia said, her voice soft. You hurt a lot of people. And now you have a chance to make it right. You can tell the truth. You can say that Ethan didn't know. You can save him. H.A. Risen looked at Ethan, his eyes filled with regret. I'm sorry. I'm so sorry. I never meant to hurt you. Ethan was silent for a long moment. Then he said, I don't know if I can ever forgive you. But I'm willing to try. If you tell them the truth, I'll do everything I can to get you a lighter sentence. I swear. H.A. Risen nodded slowly. Okay, I'll do it. I'll tell them everything. Mia felt a wave of relief wash over her. They had done it. They had gotten through to him. As they walked out of the jail, Ethan took her hand. Thank you, he said, his voice thick. I don't know how you did it, but thank you. I just told him the truth, Mia said. Sometimes that's all it takes. The weeks that followed were a whirlwind of legal proceedings and media scrutiny. H.A. Risen's testimony was a turning point in the case. He admitted to everything, exonerating Ethan completely. The investigation clear-read Ethan of all Chow Ridges, and Vogel was convicted on multiple counts of fraud and embezzlement. Ethan's lawyers called him with the news on a sunny Friday afternoon. Mia was in the kitchen, making lunch for Leo, when she heard a whoop of joy from the living room. "We won!" Ethan shouted, running into the kitchen and sweeping Mia off her feet. "It's over. We won." Mia laughed, a bright, joyful sound. "Are you serious?" "Completely," he said, setting her down. "The case is closed. I'm free. We're free." Leo came running in, his face covered in paint from a school project. "What's happening? Why is everyone so happy?" Ethan pet him up and spun him around. "We're celebrating, little man. We just won the biggest battle of our lives." Leo giggled. "Did we win a prize? Better than a prize," Ethan said, his eyes sparkling. "We got our future back." That evening, they celebrated with a quiet dinner at home. Mrs. Patterson had helped Leo make a banner that said, "We win," in wobbly letters, and it hung across the living room like a trophy. After dinner, Ethan pulled Mia aside. "There's something I want to talk to you about." Mia felt her heart skip a beat. "What is it?" He took a deep breath, then reached into his pocket and pulled out a small velvet box. "I know this is fast. I know we've only known each other for a few months. But you're the best thing that's ever happened to me, Mia. You and Leo. You've changed everything. And I want to spend the rest of my life trying to be worthy of you." He opened the box to reveal a simple, elegant diamond ring. "Will you marry me?" Mia read at the ring, tears streaming down her face. She thought of her grandmother, of the struggles she'd endured, of the long, lonely nights she'd spent wondering if things would ever get better. And here, in this moment, she had everything she'd ever dreamed of. "Yes," she said, her voice breaking. "Yes, I will marry you." Ethan slipped the ring onto her finger, then pulled her into his arms. "I love you. More than I ever thought I could love anyone." "I love you too," she said, her voice soft. "And I'm never going to let you go." Leo came running in, demanding to know what was happening. Ethan pet him up and explained that they were going to be a real family. Leo's face lit up with joy. "Does that mean I can call you Daddy now?" he asked, Ethan's eyes filled with tears. "Yes, Leo. That's exactly what it means." The engagement announcement hit the tabloids like a bomb. Ethan had tried to keep it private, but someone from the legal team had leaked the story, and within hours, the penthouse was surrounded by reporters. Mia watched them from behind the curtains, her stomach churning. "You knew this would happen," she said, turning to Ethan. "You knew they'd go crazy over this." Ethan walked over and wrapped his arms around her from behind. "I knew, but I don't see a re. Let them talk. They'll get bored eventually." "Will they?" Mia asked, her voice uncertain. "Because it seems like they're just getting sta root." Her phone buzzed. She glanced at the screen and felt her blood run cold. It was a message from an unknown number, but the words were achingly familiar. "Think you've won. Do you just wait. The truth always comes out." Mia showed the message to Ethan. His expression darkened. "I'll have my security team trace the number," he said. "This ends now." But the threats didn't stop. Over the next few days, Mia received a steady stream of messages, each one more sinister than the last. They came from different numbers, always untraceable. Whoever was behind them knew exactly how to cover their tracks. "Maybe we should postpone the wedding," Mia said one evening, her voice weary. "Just until this all blows over." Ethan shook his head firmly. "No, we're not letting them win. We're going ahead with the wedding, and we're going to do it publicly. Let them see that we're not afraid." The wedding was set for 3 weeks away. Ethan had planned an intimate ceremony at a private estate outside the city, but the leaked announcement had turned it into a media circus. Security was tripled, and invitations were sent out under strict confidentiality. Mia spent the weeks leading up to the wedding in a daze. She picked out her dress, a simple white gown that reminded her of the one her grandmother had worn in her wedding photo. She chose flowers and a cake and music, all the details that were supposed to make a wedding perfect. But the threats continued. One night, a package arrived at the penthouse, addressed to Mia. Inside was a single photo, a picture of her grandmother, taken on the day of the eviction. Her face was streaked with TRS, her hands trembling as she watched the movers say RRY out her belongings. On the back of the photo, someone had written, "Remember what you've cost her." Mia Sta read at the photo, her hands shaking. She remembered that day vividly. She had been there, trying to comfort her grandmother, trying to be strong. But she had failed. She had watched the only home her grandmother had ever known be stripped away from her. Mia, Ethan's voice cut through her thoughts. "What is it?" She handed him the photo, unable to speak. His face contorted with rage. "Whoever sent this," he said, his voice low, "I will find them. And I will destroy them." "It's not about finding them," Mia said, her voice hollow. "It's about the message. They're trying to make me feel guilty. They're trying to make me feel like I don't deserve this." Ethan took her face in his hands. "Listen to me. You deserve everything. You deserve happiness, love, a family. You deserve to be with someone who's CA residential about you. Don't let them take that away from you." Mia nodded, but the photo lingered in her mind. She couldn't shake the image of her grandmother, broken and defeated. She couldn't stop wondering what she would think of all this the night before the wedding. Mia couldn't sleep. She wandered through the penthouse, her feet silent on the cold marble floors. She found herself in the study, where Ethan's mother's photos lined the walls. She looked at the woman's face, the same Shah RP features and the RK eyes that Ethan had. "I wish you were here," she whispered. "I wish you could see him now. He's so different from the man he used to be. He's kind and loving and gentle. He's everything you wanted him to be." A voice from behind her made her jump. "I think she knows." Mia turned to see Ethan standing in the doorway, his eyes soft. "I think she's been watching over us this whole time. She would have loved you, Mia. She would have loved Leo." "How do you know?" Mia asked. "Because I love you," Ethan said, walking toward her. "And she always trusted my judgment." He took her hand and led her to the window. The city was spread out before them, a sea of lights and shadows. "Tomorrow, we start our new life. Together. Nothing else matters." Mia leaned into him, feeling the warmth of his body against hers. "I'm SCA red," she admitted. "I'm SCA red that something will go wrong, that someone will try to ruin it." "Let them try," Ethan said, his voice fierce. "I've spent my whole life fighting, and I've never lost a battle. I'm not about to start now." The wedding day dawned bright and clear. Mia woke up to the smell of pancakes and the sound of Leo's laughter. She smiled, the tension in her shoulders easing for the first time in weeks. Mrs. Patterson helped her get ready. She had brought Mia's grandmother's necklace, a simple gold chain with a small cross pendant. It had been left to Mia in her will, the only thing she had left from her grandmother's life. "It's beautiful," Mrs. Patterson said, clasping it around Mia's neck. "She would be so proud of you." Mia looked at herself in the mirror. She recognized the woman staring back at her. She looked happy, genuinely happy. It was a look she hadn't seen in years. The ceremony was held in the den of the estate. Flowers of every color lined the aisle, and the sun cast a golden glow over everything. Leo was the ring rare, walking down the aisle with a solemn expression that made everyone smile. Mia walked toward Ethan, her heart pounding. He was standing at the altar, his eyes fixed on her. She saw the TRS in his eyes, the love and devotion that radiated from every inch of him. "You look beautiful," he whispered as she reached him. "So do you." She whispered back. The ceremony was simple and heartfelt. They exchanged vows, promising to love and protect each other through everything. When the minister pronounced them husband and wife, Ethan kissed her with a passion that took her breath away. Leo ran up to them, throwing his arms around them both. "We're a family now. A real family." Mia laughed, TRS streaming down her face. "Yes, we are a real family." But as they walked back up the aisle, a commotion in the entrance caught their attention. A woman was pushing through the crowd, her face contorted with rage. She was shouting something, her voice rising above the music. "Ethan, you can't do this. You promised me." The crowd root, revealing a woman in her late 30s, elegantly dressed, but visibly distressed. It took Mia a moment to recognize her, and when she did, her blood ran cold. It was Risen's wife. Lillian Risen. Ethan's face went pale. "Lillian, what are you doing here?" "You know what I'm doing here," she spat. "You ruined my husband's life. You had him arrested, convicted, thrown in prison. And now you're standing here, playing the happy family man, like you didn't destroy everything he had. Mia stepped forward, her voice steady. Lillian, I know you're hurting. But your husband did this to himself. He chose to embezzle money. He chose to betray Ethan. No one forced him. Don't you dare talk to me about choices, Lillian said, her voice shaking. You don't know anything. You don't know what it's like to watch your husband's life fall apart. You don't know what it's like to be left with nothing. Ethan stepped in front of Mia. Lillian, I'm sorry for what happened to H.A. Risen. But he made his choices. And I made mine. I'm not going to apologize for building a life with the woman I love. Lillian sta read at him, her eyes blazing with fury. Then she turned and walked away, her heels clicking sharply on the paved path. The wedding continued, but the mood had shifted. Mia couldn't stop thinking about Lillian's words. She thought about H.A. Risen, about the years he had spent feeling invisible. She thought about her grandmother, about the pain of losing everything. And she wondered if she was really any different from the people who had hurt her. Later that night, as they sat together on the terrace of the estate, Mia voiced her fears. What if I'm just like them? Ethan, what if I'm just using you for security for money? What if I'm just as bad as Vogel, as H.A. Risen, as everyone else? Ethan turned to look at her, his eyes sea-urching hers. Do you love me? Of course I do, she said, her voice breaking. Do you love Leo more than anything? Then you're nothing like them, he said, taking her hand. They wanted power, money, control. You want love. You want family. You want to build something real. That's not the same thing. Mia let out a shaky breath. I'm just so red of losing it all. I've been hurt so many times. I don't think I could survive losing you. Ethan pulled her into his arms. You won't. I promise. I'm not going anywhere. She held on to him, burying her face in his chest. The wedding was over. They were married. They were a family. And for the first time in her life, Mia felt like she had finally found her place in the world. As the moon rose over the jardin, casting silver light across the flowers, Mia whispered a prayer to her grandmother. I did it, Grandma. I found my home. I found my family. And I'm never going to let them go. The honeymoon was supposed to be an escape, a week of sun and sand on a private island Ethan owned in the Caribbean. But the moment they stepped onto the white sand beach, Mia's phone buzzed with a message from an unknown number. You think distance changes anything? I'm always watching. She showed Ethan, and his jaw tightened. I'll have the island security sweep everything. No more interruptions. This is our time. The week was idyllic in a way that felt almost surreal. They swam in crystal clear water, ate fresh seafood under the stars, and made love in the moonlight like teenagers. Leo had stayed with Mrs. Patterson, sending them video calls every night, his face beaming with excitement. But the messages didn't stop. They came sporadically, always untraceable, always cutting through the peace like a knife. Your grandmother's ghost is watching you. Does he know what you really are? This will all end in TRS. Mia stopped showing them to Ethan. She didn't want to ruin their time together. But the fear festered inside her, gnawing at the edges of her happiness. On the last night of the honeymoon, Ethan surprised her with a candlelit dinner on the beach. The waves lapped gently at the shore, and the stars overhead were so bright they looked like scattered diamonds. I have something for you, Ethan said, pulling out a small box. It's not another ring. I've already given you the best one. But this is something different. He opened the box to reveal a key. It was old, ornate, with a tarnished brass finish. What is this? Mia asked, her voice above a whispered. It's the key to your grandmother's apartment, Ethan said. The one I had renovated. I bought the entire building, Mia. It's yours. All of it. You can do whatever you want with it. Turn it into a museum, a community center, a home for people who need help. Whatever you want. It's your legacy now. Mia sta read at the key, TRS streaming down her face. Ethan, I don't know what to say. You don't have to say anything, he said, taking her hand. You've given me so much. A family, a purpose, a reason to be a better man. This is just a small way of saying thank you. She threw her arms around him, holding him tight. I love you. I love you so much. I love you too, he whispered. And I'm going to spend the rest of my life proving it. They flew back to the city the next morning. The penthouse felt different somehow, warmer, more like home. Leo was waiting at the door, his face a mask of excitement. "Mama, Daddy, you're back," he shouted. Throwing himself into their arms, Mia hugged him tight, her heart overflowing. "We missed you so much, baby." "I missed you too," Leo said, his voice muffled against her shoulder. "But Mrs. Patterson let me stay up late and watch movies. And she taught me how to make seo keys." Ethan laughed. "Seo, ping Leo up. Sounds like you had a better time than we did." "All we did was sit on the beach." Leo giggled. "That sounds boring." "It was," Ethan said, his eyes twinkling. "I'd rather be here with you." The next few weeks were a blur of normalcy. Leo went back to school, Ethan went back to work, and Mia sta route planning the future of the community center. She met with architects and social workers, designing a place that would honor her grandmother's memory and help people who had been through what she had. But the messages continued. They came less frequently now, but they were always there, lurking in the shadows of her phone. One morning, she received a photo of herself, taken from across the street, as she walked Leo to school. "I can see you right now," the message read. Mia felt her blood run cold. She looked around frantically, but the street was empty. Whoever was sending these messages was close. Watching her, as she told Ethan that evening. His face went pale. "I'm calling the police. We're going to find out who's behind this." "I swear." The investigation took weeks. The police traced the messages to a burner phone that had been purchased at a convenience store across town. The security footage showed a woman in a hoodie, her face obscured. But the build, the posture, was achingly familiar. When they finally got a hit, Mia felt her world tilt on its axis. It was Lillian H.A. Risen. H.A. Risen's wife. "Why?" Mia asked, her voice hollow. "Why would she do this? Her husband is in prison. What could she possibly gain? It's revenge," Ethan said, his voice grim. "She blames me for what happened to H.A. Risen. And she's using you to get to me." The police arrested Lillian that night. She didn't fight it. She just sat in the back of the patrol car, her face expressionless, as Mia watched from the penthouse window. It was over. Finally over. Mia sat on the couch. Sta ring at the spot where the key to her grandmother's apartment sat on the coffee table. She thought about everything that had happened. The eviction, the rain, the desperate plea from her son, the man who had turned their lives around. She thought about the messages, the threats, the wedding, the honeymoon. It felt like a lifetime had passed in a few months. That Ethan sat down beside her, taking her hand. "It's over now? We're safe." Mia nodded, her eyes distant. "I keep thinking about Lillian. She was so full of anger, so full of pain. I wonder if I would have been like that, if I hadn't met you, if I had let the anger consume me." Ethan looked at her, his eyes soft. "You wouldn't have. You're stronger than that. You're stronger than all of them." "Am I?" Mia asked. "Because sometimes I feel so fragile. Like one wrong move, and everything will shatter." Ethan pulled her into his arms. "It won't. Because you're not alone anymore. You have me. You have Leo. You have a family that loves you." Mia let out a shaky breath. "I know. I need to believe it. I need to let go of the fear." Leo came running into the room, a drawing in his hand. "Mama, look what I made." Mia took the drawing. It was a picture of 3 figures, holding hands under a bright yellow sun. One figure had a red cape, one had a crown, and the third had a rocket ship. "It's us," Leo said, his face beaming. "You're the queen, Daddy is the superhero, and I'm the astronaut. We're a team." Mia looked at the drawing, tears streaming down her face. It was the most beautiful thing she'd ever seen. "Yes," she said, her voice breaking. "We're a team. We're a family. And we're never going to let anything tear us apart." Ethan reached out and wiped the tears from her eyes. "That's right. We're in this together. Always." Mia hugged Leo tight, then reached for Ethan's hand. The 3 of them sat together on the couch, the drawing held gently in Mia's lap. Outside, the city hummed with its endless noise. But inside the penthouse, there was only peace for the first time in her life. Mia wasn't afraid of the future. She wasn't afraid of the past. She was exactly where she was supposed to be, surrounded by love, with a family that had been forged in the fires of hardship and emerged stronger than ever. The key to her grandmother's apartment sat on the coffee table, glinting in the afternoon light. It was a symbol of everything she had overcome, everything she had built. And as she looked at it, she knew that her grandmother was watching over her, Smiling, Mia leaned her head on Ethan's shoulder, her eyes closing. "Thank you," she whispered, "for everything." "Thank you for letting me," he replied, and in that quiet moment, with the sun setting over the city and her son's laughter ringing in her ears, Mia knew that she had finally found her home.